I am Dr. Nidhi Khare. Students, all organizations progress through predictable stages of culture development. The CCL researchers, Megair, Rhodes, and Payless have observed that there are three primary stages of organizational culture. The stages are independent collaborator, independent achiever, and dependent conformer. In today's video, these three stages are explained, and I'll also explain to you the elements of building an organizational culture. So moving on to the stages of organizational culture. So what are the stages of development which organizations go through with their culture? I want to give you the foundations for understanding culture and how they move. So the first thing to know is, what is culture? So we'll look at the beliefs and behaviors, or the beliefs and practices. That is to say, how people do things around here. Around here means in the organization. And what people believe around here. The reason is that beliefs drive the behavior. Now to start, we need to think from where to where. That is, from where you are to where you want to be with your culture. The organization actually moves through stages of development of organizational culture. Now imagine a visual snowman. And so the first stage of development that organizations go through is what is called as the dependent conformer stage of development. So this is a sort of cultural environment, very commanding, very controlled, very hierarchical. People are dependent on authority figures on what to do. There are lots of rules and regulations, and people conform to those regulations. At times, it can be very suitable to have that kind of culture, but often it really restricts what you are trying to achieve. The next stage of development is called the independent achiever stage. And this is where most organizations have a center of gravity at the moment. The independent achiever stage is very much around individual heroic leaders. The leadership culture is characterized by people who on their own give big results individually, and they are rewarded and recognized for this. So this is all about being really independent achievers. And so it's good up to a point. The upside is that people really get motivated, as it is merit-based. The downside is that this encourages more individualistic and more selfish behaviors. So, the next level up is called the interdependent collaborator stage of development. So, we are seeing more and more organizations push into this stage space now. And this space is very much around seeing outside of just you and your own needs, or me and my team, and seeing interdependently across the system of the organization and even outside the organization. So people start seeing much more systematically. They start to think across the boundaries of the organization. So operations start coordinating much more with manufacturing or sales or marketing. And so it actually brings a new mindset of how people think. Collaboration becomes much easier because people are not just focused on their own personal individual results. And why this matters at the moment is because this is a culture which lots of people are creating strategies which will acquire this type of culture. So what is needed is a diagnosis for the organization. For what sort of culture do we require in order to be successful? The CEOs need to do a self-diagnosis. Questions to be asked to them include what kind of business challenges they are facing, what business strategy they have got, what sort of culture they need to acquire in order to execute that. So as soon as we are through with the diagnosis, so definitely we'll be able to build a culture which we strive for and we see in successful companies. So then how do we create a culture The questions which is often asked in successful organizations is, how did you build this great group of people? How do you get people to care and have such a good time at work? Basically, they are asking, what's the secret of the organization's culture? Actually, there is no secret. There are 1,000 things to make the culture what it is. The culture is the everyday reality of organizational life. The culture is not the mission statement, the vision, your bank balance, or the staff handbook, though all these contribute to creating it. The culture is what we do and say, the way we behave, the way we treat each other, our products, our customers, our community, and ourselves. In a sense, it's the personality of the company. While speeches, grand plans, fancy training manuals, etc., have some influence on the culture, they are just as likely to have a negative as a positive influence. Ultimately, it's what leaders do much more than what we say that makes the culture what it is. So there are only two main ways to build an organizational culture, either with consideration and conscious intent, or by contrast, to let the culture come together as it does, giving it little thought in the process. So let's look at some important elements for consciously creating an organizational culture. Teach it, define it, live it, measure it, reward it. Teach it. The more and more effectively we teach people what we are looking for in our culture, the more likely it will become the reality. Whatever orientation and training work you are doing, you should talk about the kind of culture you are going after. Describe the way you'd like things to be working. Talk about the informal ways in which you envision the group working together, the way you want the customer experience to feel, etc. It's okay to teach about parts of the current culture that you are working on changing. There's nothing wrong with saying something like, you may notice that there are people who arrive a bit late for their scheduled shifts. We are working on building a culture that's a lot timelier. My expectation is that you be on time as per the schedule, regardless of what others may still do. I'm looking for you to help lead the way to making this cultural improvements. And one of the best ways to teach the culture is to tell stories. Next, define it. If you have a number of leaders running your organization, you may not immediately have full agreement on what your desired culture is. Now, in that case, there must be hard discussion amongst the key decision makers so that you can reach a consensus. Putting the vision in writing is an essential element of making it successful. When the dialogue stays verbal only, it is inevitable that everyone will leave the room with a different version of what was agreed upon. Documenting it is far more likely to help you get where you want to go. Next, live it. Culture is very little about what we say and very much about what we do. If we don't live it, it's never going to play out as we want. Organizational culture is built slowly over time, not with a quick decision or the writing of a big check. This is especially critical for the leaders in our organizations. The staff sees everything the leaders do. The influence of the leader is particularly strong in a startup situation. Things are moving quickly. People are operating in close quarters, usually under high stress, and behaviors can have long and lasting effects. Some of the meaningful ways that leaders impact the culture include how well our words match our deeds, how we handle things when they don't match up, which of our values we live and which we only pay lip service to, who we hire and who we fire, who we reward and who we don't, the systems, recipes, processes we put in place, how we handle failure. How we manage difficult situations is one of the biggest contributors to the creation of organizational culture. It's easier to build a culture when everything is going well, but strong cultures are partially built by what we do during hard times. When money is tight, how do we act? When a staff member is ill, how do we respond? When a good customer can't pay their bills, what do we say? It is incumbent on everyone in the organization, not just owners and managers, to take responsibility for the culture we have and to make it the culture they want. The most effective organizations and the most solid cultures are where everybody comes reasonably close to living the culture and can acknowledge constructively where they are failing short, and then actively move towards either getting better and or actively supporting the others that are already doing it better. Next, measure it. Once we have identified the key elements of our desired culture and written them down, we must measure our success in making them a reality, a cultural reality. Many will argue that you cannot measure things like fun or supportiveness. I think you can. If you want to have a results-oriented organization, you are more likely to succeed if you measure your success at putting the culture into place. If you are setting out to measure cultural characteristics like fun, remember that the judgment will be made by the participants in the organization. Once you have that mindset, you can measure it. And lastly, reward it. A common problem in every organization is the mismatch between what it says it wants and what's rewarded. In some cases, the issue is just an absence of rewards. No organization will ever perfectly align every reward with the behaviors we seek. But at least being cognizant of the key elements of the cultural vision we are going after and then making sure that we recognize and reward those is important. So I hope the elements of building organizational culture are clear to you. Thank you.